I would say look back. So we have this thing called the reversal system where everything that happens in the swing is actually predetermined by what happened before it. And so
Okay.
when you look at like that back leg coming off, did it come off the ground because the front foot planted extremely hard and then they launched? Or did they launch and then the front foot came down extremely hard and then the back foot came off the ground? So a lot of these scissor videos that people are seeing right now, they actually launched before the front foot came in contact, which the launch is the moment the barrel actually starts to turn on plane. The moment that they decide to swing, you'll see Richard calls it the missing frames, right? Which is like, not a lot of people understand what that is, but that's the moment that the barrel actually starts to turn. You don't see it in like extremely advanced like cameras like these. You wouldn't be able to see it in slow-mo, right? Because all you're seeing is the barrel like moving with the body as you turn. But when the camera's a little bit older and you can see those missing frames, that's where you can kind of see the barrel start to blur. Like he's decided at this moment, I'm going to turn the barrel. Like I'm going to swing is what his decision actually is. And then the barrel starts to turn. And it's like sometimes that happens and then you see the front foot brace because it's just doing what it needs to do. And they're actually launching from the rear leg at that point. You know, like Dustin Pedroia was a really good example of that. He had a massive forward move, but he was still able to launch from the rear leg, actually like turning the pelvis open into front foot plant rather than front foot plant, then massive hip shoulder separation, then pelvis turn.
Yeah, he used to. I mean, he also stepped in the bucket like every single swing, didn't he? He was like, you know,
So
he really.
That's
he
the
wasn't
thing.
an
But
outlier.
if you see his swing and you see that back foot come off the ground, you're like, oh, he's doing it. And it's like, well, did he really? You know?
Yeah.
So I would say challenge the thought, challenge the idea by zooming back. Just a little bit and see. Now, some people do scissor and some people practice that in their training and some people have success with it. I'm not saying that it's technically wrong. I just believe that HLP, the technique of launching from the rear leg, is the best technique out there. It's the more optimal technique in order to like teach somebody how to become efficient and get on plane sooner.
That's fair.
You know?
That's fair. The other one was like we were talking about getting on plane, which I 100% agree on getting on plane early.
Yeah.
Always, that was something that my dad always, stressed at a young age. Now, even though he grew up being taught swing down,
by the way, because in our generation that wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
it was
he
clip it and try to get backspin.
Get backspin.
Yeah.
He always thought that was a ridiculous concept. He's like,
Good for him.
and so like I appreciate. So again, I have a little, even though he's an old school guy, a little different perspective. It was always like, man, it just makes most sense to get the bat on plane with the ball, keep it there as long as you can, gives you a chance. You know, if your timing's a little bit off, you have a better shot at it in a line drive.
Yeah.
You know, that was pretty much it. Very simple, basic hitting, philosophy, I guess. But is another way besides, the snap or whatever, right? It's called a snap, the rear return or whatever. Is sometimes getting the bat on plane, couldn't that be dictated also by your hip hinge? As far as like guys that are more upright, like here, you really have to be intentional with getting there. When a guy that's a little bit more hip hinged over the plate, it's almost naturally is in that slot as you start to rotate. Is there anything to that?
I would challenge that idea a little bit. Not saying that you're wrong, but what I would say is we actually don't teach anybody to hinge at the hips. So our goal here is to try to get the pelvis to kind of coil over that ball of the femur. So try to take the hips over the rear leg. And basically what happens is like the femur actually creates like internal rotation in the hip socket right in here. So you're kind of winding that up as you stretch up the back. I know I'm on camera sitting in a seat, okay? But it's like basically that's the goal there. And then as the ball starts to come into play, the hitter has his sense of readiness already, and the ball starts to come into play at pitch release. He's ready to swing at pitch release, but things happen during that time where he's preparing to swing. And so you'll start to see hitters kind of go like this and go down, and they're just prepping in that fashion, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't teach like a pre-hinge or sit in your heel or anything like that, because that's not really a coil in the hip socket. That's actually just like bottoming out like a squat almost. So think about the difference between like if you stood up on one leg and wound yourself up, there would be a different feeling there inside of your hip than if you just stood on one leg and squatted down. Mm-hmm. And I think most hitters are squatting down, but when you squat down, there's nothing to uncoil. So the way to get out of it is to kind of fly forward. And so now you're pushing like lateral force into the ground. You're going forward to swing, which causes the momentum and hip shift and stuff like that. And then the second part to that I would challenge is posture. I don't think posture is something that actually needs to be focused on, like posture over the plate, because all of that is already going to be determined, in my opinion, from what we've done, is by how he's loading and how he's launching. So the moment at launch, how he launches is going to heavily determine his posture over the plate, but it's not something that, in my opinion, should be controlled or should be focused on in training, right? Because if I focus on posture and how he looks over the plate, that means I'm going to be focusing on an action that is heavily influenced by what happened before it. And so it's like, does that make common sense, right? To like focus on this action, even though I know that the launch is actually going to determine his posture over the plate. And so then for us, it's like, no, we got to take it back a bit, right?
Yeah.
And then focus on the quality of his launch and how he's launching, the direction at the moment he decides to swing, the direction of his launch, and focus on that as opposed to like how he looks at contact or after contact. Like for us, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause if you go back in the day, like again, probably when my dad was playing, even into the 90s, probably. I mean, most batting stances were very over the plate. Mm-hmm. Obviously that's changed in the 2000s. You guys were more upright.
Yeah.
But I mean, majority of the history of baseball, guys were very much standing here with hinged at the hip, upper body, staying over the plate. Mm-hmm. And you think people moved away from it because of what you're saying?
I don't think people moved away from it. I think people just naturally wanted to be more comfortable before the pitch got there. So it's like, I think the only thing that we focus on at that phase. So for us, there's 3 phases to the swing. There's the readiness phase, which is what we're talking about right now. Yep. The loading phase, which is how you're prepping to launch, and then the launch phase. Everything after the launch doesn't matter. Like you can't control what happens after you've already decided to swing. It's going to happen, and so we train the swing based off those 3 phases. And so I think what happens is people may have got away from that to try to focus on their feeling before the actual pitches come. And so that just comes from comfort, and the ideology of like, well, you have to sit a certain way over. That's probably kind of shifted out. Not that many coaches are like teaching like set up with your chest over the plate now before he throws, right? They're more focused on like posture at contact, which we don't focus on. But I think that has just kind of like, I don't think HLP changed that. I think people just
I think that definitely changed beforehand.
Yeah,
for sure. If you enjoyed that clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this content valuable.